Chapter 8. Progress. Sheikah's heart pounded as she made her way back up through the sewers and into the castle proper. Now that she knew what to look for, there were faint, silvery orbs all over her path that she had simply overlooked in her haste to get down to the tavern. Midna's words came back to her as she passed a pair of orbs in the hallway.
You're corporeal, so you must be important somehow.
She shook her head. Midna told her what to expect. She just hadn't understood. She hurried back to her rooms. The excursion took more time than anticipated. When the midday guard made its rounds, Zelda made sure she was in the sitting room. The dark beast lumbered slowly across the space and set a plate down on a lounge, as it had every day. Before it could turn away, however, Zelda cleared her throat.
After I've eaten, you will take me to see your leader,
she asserted, pleased that the statement at least sounded confident. The beast's mask faced her for a moment before bowing low, almost to the floor. The creature then turned and left her to eat the small meal. After her increased activity the last few hours, Zelda realized she was very hungry. She had not been eating much in the past week or so after. No. Since the invader had entered the castle, she couldn't think about what had happened. Not yet. There would be a time for it later. She finished all the food on her plate in a matter of minutes, and then settled herself to wait for the guard to return. As she followed the creature downstairs a bit later, Zelda set about weaving the protective energy shield around herself that she had taken to maintaining shortly after the goddess ceremony. What had first started as good exercise in splitting her attention and maintaining control was now, she realized, possibly extremely important to her survival in the coming days and weeks. At least until she learned more about her adversary, Zelda decided that shielding herself could only be a good idea. The dark beast led the princess to the study, and she couldn't help but hope that the map was still sprawled across the table. A quick glance around the space quickly showed Zelda that the map was rolled up, though still present on the table. This was the only difference in the room from the morning. The eerie blue glow continued to light the space from near the fireplace, and Zant stood between Zelda and the table.
Well,
The usurper hissed when Zelda stopped walking. She positioned herself a few steps past the doorframe, but still a few strides away from her towering foe.
I must say, Princess, I'd expected this meeting to come much sooner. I suppose I owe you gratitude for leaving me in peace to do with your realm as I see fit.
He continued. Zelda's pulse jumped as he spoke. The maniacal edge that had resonated in Zant's voice in the throne hall was replaced by a smug condescension, but the inflections and tone were the same. She took a grounding breath before replying.
No longer. I have come to demand your immediate surrender and removal from Hyrule.
Zant clicked his tongue and hissed a low chuckle.
Lofty demands for one in your position, Princess. I don't think you understand the situation very well.
He growled. He began taking slow steps to close the distance between them and circled around behind Zelda, blocking her only route of escape.
Twilight now covers the land. There is no stopping it. Even if I were to leave, your people and countryside would continue to suffer, never to be restored to their original status.
He claimed as he moved, a predator closing in on its prey. Zelda took a few quick steps and turned, leaning back on the edge of the table as she stared up at the gray mask on Zant's head. After another grounding breath, she challenged.
You lied to me in the throne hall. What makes you think I'll believe you now?
Zant moved to stand directly in front of Zelda. He towered over her, taking up most of her vision. He reached a hand out as though he would grab her arm, but Zelda immediately swatted it back and cried.
You will not touch me again. I will find a way to defeat you. I will restore the light.
She sidestepped and took a few steps toward the door before stopping at the sound of laughter behind her. It was dark and twisted, but still recognizable as amusement. She turned back to look at the man. Zant half turned and hissed.
What makes you so confident, Princess? You couldn't stop me from claiming the lives of those closest to you. How are your people any different?
Zelda straightened and tucked her chin, fixing Zant with her most piercing stare. She allowed her energy shield to flare into visibility for a split second, revealing a sliver of her magic.
I tried to lead through mercy, and I will admit that I was frightened.
She asserted.
But now, I know your intentions. There will be no more mercy. I will ensure that you are destroyed. By the goddesses, I swear I will ensure that you are destroyed.
That night, Zelda slept a dreamless, peaceful sleep. She felt refreshed when she woke the next morning. And even though she was still unable to see the sun through the twilight, Zelda felt there was a light at the end of the tunnel now. Midna had restored her hope. Zant was not impregnable. Her excursion the previous morning had told Zelda that there was something in Hyrule that he wanted. Something that he had yet to obtain. All she had to do was figure out what. After her small breakfast, Zelda donned her Sheikah garb and returned to the halls. Excitement thrilled through her limbs, willing her head to study immediately. Habitual prudence checked her enthusiasm, however, and she decided that spending time learning the habits of the guards and the invader would be the best use of her time for now. Surveillance had never been something Sheikah had enjoyed practicing during her training, but the practical application involved much more adrenaline and care than her zero-stake missions through the castle as a teenager. Though she had more knowledge on the best hiding areas, she still felt the dark beasts were more perceptive than they let on. More than once during her exploration, Sheikah was forced to hold her breath and freeze as still as possible while a creature stood nearby, swinging its mask back and forth slowly. She did not think they could see, or at least not in the same way that she was able to. They seemed to rely on sound most heavily, or on the input of another beast. Sheikah did her best to avoid the groups of beasts after she was cornered by a trio outside the throne room on her third day of surveillance. The day prior, she had heard someone yelling from within. Curiosity drove her to try and sneak her way inside, and though the wide antechamber was empty before, Sheikah made her way to the door. She had quickly regretted her haste in moving forward. She had checked the room. She was sure of it. Still, before she could press her ear to the outside of the door, a couple of hefty thuds resounded behind her and she froze. Two shadow beasts lumbered through the space, moving slowly until one of them seemed to register Sheikah's presence. Then, moving almost in tandem, the beast rushed Sheikah, one pinning her to the door with its claw-like fingers, and the other cocking its head at her before raising a hand to strike her down. Sheikah registered a few things in that heartbeat. The cold, uncomfortable touch of the creature radiating through her sleeve, terror rattling down her spine and freezing her where she stood. Voices being raised from within the throne hall once more, and the undeniable compulsion to send a wave of her light magic through the antechamber. Trusting her instinct, Sheikah exhaled hard and blasted the chamber with light. As soon as she was able to snatch her arm away, she slipped between the shadow creatures and ran as silently as she could through the opposite door and back up the hallway. Heart pounding hard against her ribs. She glanced back once and almost stopped running when what she saw behind her were not two enraged shadow beasts, but two small creatures. Soft lines, black, blue, and cream colors topped by small shocks of red hair, were the only details she caught before the door to the throne hall opened, and Sheikah focused on running once more. Back in her rooms, Zelda tried her best to calm her racing heart. After sitting and working through breathing exercises for a while, Zelda slowly regained her feet and began pacing before the window in her bedroom. Initially, the experience had not only frightened her, but felt like a failure. Now, however, she examined her memory of the incident more closely.
The shadow creatures seem to be connected to each other somehow. Perhaps through some sort of mental link? That is interesting.
She thought.
And I could hear a raised voice when they rushed me. What did it say?
Zelda pulled the hood of her cloak more securely forward around her face and snuggled deeper into the thick scarf she had wrapped her face with. She moved to stand before the fire. Her fingers and toes were cold to the point of pain this afternoon. Once she was a bit more comfortable, she closed her eyes and crossed her arms. She wanted to remember what the angry exclamation had been. The voice had sounded deeper. Male. But unlike Xant's,
Who could be here now, and able to wield such anger without consequence?
she sighed and moved back to the windows, staring out at the twilight. A light giggle behind her made Zelda turn and gasp as she found the room was occupied by others beside herself. Midna sat astride a dark wolf with distinct white markings on their forehead and blue rings in their ears. The imp rolled her eye as the creature relaxed their alert stance and slowly approached Zelda.
Midna?
Zelda was stunned, her mind still trying to pull words from her memory. She felt it was struggling to process the present now. Midna grinned and said,
You remembered my name? What an honor for me.
Glancing back down at the wolf, Zelda mentally shook herself.
So, this is the one for whom you were searching?
She asked gently. Midna hummed before replying.
He's not exactly what I had in mind, but I guess he'll do.
She nodded with a toothy grin as she finished her statement, and Zelda suppressed a smile. Dropping to one knee to look at the wolf in his intelligent blue eyes, Zelda allowed a small smile to rise to her lips. She looked the creature over and frowned a moment later, however.
You were imprisoned?
Her question was sorrowful, and she paused before continuing.
I am sorry.
The wolf cocked his head to one side and gazed at Zelda with bright eyes. He seemed to smile at her. Zelda tucked her chin, glad that her hood concealed much of the sorrow in her face. Midna rejoined.
Poor thing. He has no idea where this is or what has happened.
She straightened up and fixed Zelda with a slightly evil grin, putting her hand on her hip before continuing.
So, don't you think you should explain to him what you've managed to do? You owe him that much, Twilight Princess.
She chuckled, and Zelda felt the words tear straight into her heart. She bowed her head, squeezing her eyes shut tight. Midna was right. She was right, and this poor man deserved an explanation. Zelda took a grounding breath and looked up into the wolf's eyes once more.
Listen carefully.
She began.
This was once the land where the power of the gods was said to slumber. This was once the kingdom of Hyrule, but that blessed kingdom has been transformed by the king that rules the twilight.
Zelda sighed and shook her head.
It has been turned into a world of shadows, ruled by creatures who shun the light.
She added before pausing again. Emotion had colored her last statement. A hint of sorrow and despair she had been feeling before Midna's first visit. And so she paused to gain control once more. Once she felt she had it, she turned back to the window and told the story of that fateful morning in the throne hall. She managed to keep her tone even, though she was forced to clasp her fingers together to still their shaking.
The kingdom succumbed to twilight, but I remain its princess.
Zelda continued, turning back to her guest. She reached up and removed her hood before blinking at the wolf once.
I am Zelda.
The wolf's eyes lit with recognition as he gazed at her.
You don't have to look so sad.
Zelda looked up at the imp, unsure if she was being serious.
We actually find it to be quite livable. I mean, is perpetual twilight really all that bad?
Zelda pursed her lips.
Midna, this is no time for levity. The shadow beasts have been searching far and wide for you,
she said quietly.
Why is this?
The imp rose in the air and spun, stopping with her back to Zelda.
Why indeed? You tell me.
Midna shrugged and giggled. Frustration rose, but Zelda forced herself to remain in control.
Time has grown short,
she said.
The guard will soon make his rounds.
She pursed her lips again as Midna dropped herself onto the wolf's back hard.
You must leave here, quickly.
Rolling her eye, Midna said.
She's right. Let's get out of here before they find us. But, Princess?
The wolf stopped in his tracks, halfway to the door. Midna looked over her shoulder at Zelda.
Don't forget your end of the deal, okay?
She gave a toothy grin and wiggled her fingers before giggling and turning herself forward once more. Though the imp had tested her control, Zelda was impressed that she had returned so soon with their added help. Her apparent dedication was reassuring, so Zelda straightened and looked at the girl before replying.
Worry not, Midna. I am working hard on my end.
With that, her company disappeared into the sitting room. Chapter 9. 2 steps forward and a great leap back. That night, Zelda remained in her rooms. She returned to her chair after her visitors left, resuming her breathing exercises and mastering her emotions.
That imp.
She huffed and refocused on deep, slow breaths.
I understand Xan's frustration with her,
She thought.
though not perhaps what she has done to spark it in him.
She took another slow, deep breath.
That man.
Zelda picked up her train of thought from before her visit. She closed her eyes, but the memory would not sharpen. Frustrated, she shook her head and opened her eyes, gazing into the bright flames of the fire.
I will need to do some more work, it appears.
She continued,
Besides getting a look at that map.
before venturing back into the castle. Zelda thought about her next steps.
Telna is inaccessible right now. We really need more support.
She huffed a sigh.
Of course, I need information to share when I'm able to access that support. Ugh, I should go see Xant again.
She realized. Just the thought of being in the same room as that man sent chills up her arms and down her spine. Zelda pulled her hood back into place and crossed her arms after moving the chair closer to the fire.
Today was rocky, but I will do better. I must.
Zelda gave herself the rest of the night for recovery. The encounter with the Shadow Beast earlier in the day had truly shaken her. She deserved some time to regroup. Shoving aside the memory of Xant's derision in the study, Zelda asserted to herself again that she needed to allow herself time to heal some. Though she knew this to be true, Zelda couldn't bring herself to try and think about any of it. She just couldn't. She wondered if she would ever be able to set foot in the throne hall again without feeling sick to her stomach. Zelda huffed a sigh and jumped up, starting to pace the floor. She stopped by her bed after a few turns of the room and began changing into her bedclothes. She wrapped her scarf back around her neck and her cloak around her shoulders when she had finished and returned to her chair. The evening guard had not made his rounds yet, but she felt worn out. There had been too much today. Too much. She drew her legs up to her chest and curled into the chair, staring into the fire. When she awoke the next morning, Zelda felt a burning need to destroy Xant. Midna's visit had left her feeling drained, but also reminded her acutely of what happened and what was still happening in her kingdom. She dressed herself in her Sheikah leathers and donned her cloak over top while waiting for the first guard to make its rounds. Once the guard had again left her alone, Zelda plaited her hair, wound her face wrap and scarf, and slipped out of the room. She took her time, unwilling to suddenly find herself cornered again, and approached the study with great care. The door sat open as it had on her first morning excursion, though now no glow poured from it. Sheikah once more hid herself behind the tapestry against the wall outside. She waited and listened, but she heard nothing. Sheikah squeezed her eyes shut.
It cannot be this easy. Where is Xant? Where are the guards?
She sent a small pulse of magic into the room, trying to detect anyone without giving away her presence. There truly was no one waiting in ambush. Sheikah took a hesitant step forward before rushing into the room. She dove under the table, the sound of shouting echoing into the chamber from the hallway behind her and jolting her into action. She recovered quickly and crouched over her dominant leg, the other stretched out for balance. Sheikah held a small throwing knife in each hand. A small part of her mind registered how naturally the knives had appeared in her hands and glowed with pride. But she pushed the bright joy down for the moment. She needed to focus, forcing her lungs to cycle as slowly as she could with the adrenaline that just flooded her system. She counted.
1, 2, 3.
Breaths as she listened for running feet. All she heard was continuous shouting. It was again one male voice, but not Zant. The echoes craning down the hallway muddled the meaning before it reached her, but she thought she could make out a few of the words. Princess. Kingdom. Twilight. Sheikah swallowed hard. Someone was very angry, and they were speaking about her?
I don't know what I could have done to abandon my kingdom more completely.
She mused, biting her lips.
They cannot be displeased with me. A mystery for another day, perhaps. Now, time to look at that map.
Returning her knives to their sheaths, Sheikah inched her way out from under the table. She continued to stare at the door before straightening to her full height and turning to face the table. The shouting had lulled to loud talking, and there shouldn't be another guard coming past the study for a little while. But having an unknown presence in the castle put Sheikah on edge. Her nerves practically tingled as she struggled to hear any footsteps headed in her direction. Finally satisfied, she turned to face the table, and the map spread out across its surface. Sheikah scanned the familiar map and ignored her emotional reaction. The map was old. She knew it had been a gift to her father from his father. Laying before her in the relative gloom of the chamber, it was torn and battered, with new stray ink marks splotched in various places. Scribbled language that she couldn't read trailed around the edges. Multiple circles with X's through them ringed prominent points of the map, and even larger circles highlighted the ancient ruins of Snow Peak and the location of the Temple of Time. A large knife had been driven hard into the surface of the table through the location of Hyrule Castle. Sheikah covered her mouth and winced. It appeared that their new visitor had quite the temper. Giving the map a more deliberate scan, Sheikah did her best to commit the markings to memory. Taking a deep breath, she crouched and made her way back to the open door. Giving the table one last glance over her shoulder, Sheikah melted back under the tapestry once more. After changing into a warm blue gown and replacing her cloak, Zelda waited for her midday meal. She wanted to know more about the new presence in the castle. She resolved to demand another audience with the shadowed intruder at the conclusion of her meal. Soon, Zelda followed the shadow beast downstairs. It led her to a new room today, a formal drawing room the late queen had used to entertain nobles on occasion. The walls were hung with portraits of past royal families, and faded tapestries depicting the creation of Hyrule by Din, Farour, and Nehru. Just seeing the golden goddesses gave Zelda a sense of confidence. The creature gestured to one of the couches in the room, watched her sit, and then left her alone. The hearth set into the opposite wall sat cold and empty, and two tall windows filled the space with a watery, cool light. The room was populated by 3 couches in total, a low table spanning the distance between them all, and small statues of various creatures from across Hyrule. Near each goddess tapestry stood a small figure of a Goron, a Hylian child, and a Zora. Zelda had always found the statues somewhat uncomfortable while growing up. She did not understand why their allies were displayed in less than their true-to-life size, as the statues of the royal family around the castle were. Today, they were a small reminder of times past, and a suggestion of what she had to fight for. The door flew open with force and crashed into the wall behind it. Zelda jumped in her seat and gasped before immediately ensuring that her magical shield was in place. Zant stalked into the room, footsteps uncharacteristically loud. He sat heavily on the couch across from her. Zelda hummed after a moment.
Bad morning? I cannot say I'm disappointed.
Zant hissed. His hands clenched into fist on his knees, and his chest heaved as he took a deep breath.
What could you possibly want from me today, princess?
He growled.
You appear no closer to your goal of destroying me. I might watch your tone when addressing me. In fact, such insolence will get you into trouble.
Zelda paused a beat, examining her folded hands in her lap before fixing Zant with her best icy stare.
You hold no authority here, and I will address you however I see fit.
She smoothed her skirt across her lap before continuing.
I need more firewood in my room. I require more than scraps for meals. You will ensure more food is sent at each mealtime. Also,
She paused, watching as Zant rose from the couch and practically glided to the mantel over the empty fireplace. Once he had again stilled, she continued.
there is a disturbance in the castle. I feel a more hostile presence. You will tell me what has happened to cause such a change.
A low chuckle reached Zelda's ears, and she froze her face into a mask of indifference, willing her emotions to remain manageable. She had doubted that the invader would acquiesce easily, but his derision was unsettling. Zant turned and began walking toward Zelda, the chuckle continuing as he grew closer. He towered above her before he sat on the couch next to her and placed a lanky hand on her knee. She felt her heart begin to speed up in her chest.
Oh, princess.
He chuckled.
I think you will find that you are the one without authority here.
He gripped the joint, hand large enough to reach across the top from tendon to tendon. Zelda returned her eyes to her hands, her pulse jumping into a gallop.
He should not be able to touch me without pain.
She thought, somewhat stunned. Worry began swirling in the back of her mind, and her chest became tight with fear.
I will grant you more wood, but you will subsist on the food provided to you.
Zant tightened his grip on her leg, and an involuntary gasp escaped her lips as pain lanced through the area.
I am blessed, my foolish princess. I will gladly tell you that I have been blessed by my God's manifestation. He is greater and more terrible than even I myself am.
He paused again, leaning forward. Zelda scanned his body with her magic and became nauseous. His whole body was cloaked in dark power. Zelda had never encountered a magic like it before. The spiraling tongue of Zant's mask slid back, revealing thin lips and pale skin. Zelda's heartbeat jumped higher.
One day, perhaps even soon, you may have the joy of meeting him yourself.
Zelda felt something pop in her leg, and the pain increased sharply as Zant further tightened his grip across her knee. She whimpered. Her throat had long gone dry, so she whispered with as much force as she could muster.
You are hurting me.
Zant chuckled right into Zelda's ear and closed his hand even tighter on her leg, nails punching through the fabric of her skirt and into the flesh beneath. She gasped and bit her lip hard. She started to shake.
I wonder,
He hissed.
I wonder how much pain you could take, how far I could push you. You would no doubt lose consciousness before I could have any real fun.
With his free hand, Zant reached up and grabbed Zelda's braid close to her scalp, pulling her head back and down with a jerk. She gasped, biting her lip again before another whimper could escape.
I won't give him the satisfaction. I won't.
She thought, squeezing her eyes shut tight against her tears.
Then again, perhaps you would surprise me, as she did.
Zant said with a sigh. His breath was cool against Zelda's skin, and she shivered.
It is tempting, truly.
He growled before sharply biting the outside of her ear. Zelda cried out involuntarily, the bright pain too much for her to withstand in silence.
Let go of me.
She quietly demanded. Zant chuckled again before cooing.
What, princess? enjoying yourself?
The door opened at that moment, and Zant released Zelda's hair. He dug his nails further into her leg at the same time. Zelda leaned as far away from him as she could. A shadow beast faced them for a moment before bowing and withdrawing from the room. Terror rose in Zelda's throat as the door again shut. But Zant hissed and gripped her leg even tighter before releasing her and standing. She felt grinding in her joint and was left with a sharp pain where his fingers had dug in.
You are a distraction. Nothing more.
Zant finally growled before turning and stalking toward the door.
I am off to find your counterpart. Stay in your rooms, if you know what is good for you. Next time, I may not be able to help myself.
The voyage back to her suite took Zelda much longer than it should have. The pain in her knee was excruciating. She clung to furniture and the walls as much as she could to keep her weight off of it. And by the time she made it back to her rooms, she was ready to collapse. She pushed past the couch in the sitting room in favor of her bed. After sinking onto the edge and dragging herself into the center using her good leg and arm, Zelda let her body rest. Her mind continued to churn as she thought through what supplies would likely help her to clean and brace her leg.
Bandages. Alcohol?
She reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear and hissed, the light contact exacerbating the flesh wounds she had received there. She grimaced.
Cotton or gauze as well.
She added.
I should have all of these in the kit Ivan gave me.
Zelda sighed and dragged herself toward the far corner of the head of the bed where a small set of drawers stood. Opening the top drawer, she pulled out a handheld mirror and examined her ear. She pursed her lips. The cartilage looked to be damaged, as the usual smooth arc of her ear was now bent at an odd angle. Blood oozed slowly down the outer edge, and over the inner ridges from small gashes on the upper and lower ridges of her ear.
If he is like Minna, then I am not surprised at the sharpness of his teeth.
She mused as she set the mirror down on top of the small dresser. Zelda dreaded what came next, but knew that she must evaluate her legs sooner than later. She centered herself on the bed and sat up before pulling away the layers of fabric hiding her leg. The underskirt was soaked through with blood and sticking to her skin. Zelda grit her teeth before slowly pulling the ruined skirt away from her knee, humming against the discomfort. She breathed deeply in an attempt to slow her heart rate. The joint was swollen over the inner side and red. 4 narrow gashes oozing blood on the inner surface, and another one on the outer surface doing the same. The skin was inflamed already, the wounds looking slightly puckered even after less than an hour. Zelda's heart sank.
The infection took no time setting in, I see.
She thought, knowing that she needed to treat it as soon as possible to avoid a major health threat. Ivan had spent a month drilling basic medical facts into her mind less than a year before.
Thank the goddesses I paid attention for those weeks. I remember scoffing at his concern over my scratches and scrapes. If I see him again.
She broke off her train of thought abruptly.
When I see him again, I'll have to thank him.
Zelda closed her eyes and shook her head.
Not now. Not yet.
She asserted.
I will grieve once this is resolved.
She took a few deep breaths and opened her eyes once more. Zelda remembered tucking the small medical pouches Ivan had given her into the back of her wardrobe. She had never thought she would need them, as she had always had access to the healers of the kingdom through her status.
Will probably be best to slide myself over there on the floor. Not very dignified, but I would rather not risk further injury through continued use, I think.
She decided.
How times have changed.
She lowered herself to the floor using her arms and one good leg before half dragging and half scooting herself across the stonework, taking pains not to jostle her leg too much. Soon, Zelda uncorked the stopper of the medium-sized flask containing clear liquid, the largest item in the pack. She held a scrunched piece of gauze over the mouth of the bottle and tipped some of the liquid onto it, trying to go slowly so not to waste any.
Ivan warned me that this can be unpleasant to use. I wonder if he was referring to the smell.
She mused before pressing the saturated cloth into the gash on the outside of her knee. Zelda immediately recoiled. jerking her hand back so quickly and forcefully that she hit the open door of the wardrobe with the back of it. The gash continued to sting and burn where she had touched it with the claw, and she allowed herself to release a high-pitched whine.
Ugh. Unpleasant was an understatement, but I must continue. Everyone said this was very important.
She encouraged herself, steeling her mind against the pain she now anticipated from the rest of her cleaning. She reapplied the cloth to the same wound, pressing it as hard as she could bear to ensure that the alcohol would have a chance of penetrating into the deep puncture. Tears blurred her vision, but Zelda dashed them away before they could fall. She pulled out a fresh piece of cloth and wiped over the clean gash, removing any excess alcohol left behind. Before continuing to the other side of her knee, she leaned against the closed door of her wardrobe and stared at the grain of the open door in front of her.
I just need a moment to rest. Just a moment.
Zelda started awake, suddenly roused by the sound of her sitting door room opening. She sat up straight and glanced around. As her eyes wandered over the unstoppered bottle, the small pieces of cloth, and the blood on her leg, the pain registered once more in the back of her head. The intensity had decreased, but the ache was deep, and to make matters worse, she had pinned her injured ear between herself and the wardrobe, bringing more awareness to that wound. She blinked a few times, her exhausted thoughts slowly catching up. Zelda heard the sound of a tray being set down on her small table before the door again opened and closed.
The evening meal already?
She grimaced,
I have been pushing myself too hard lately.
not missing the irony of her thoughts. She once more steeled herself against the pain she was about to inflict upon her injury, and dove into her work. The process was excruciating, but Zelda managed to clean her leg wounds reasonably well. A couple of the gashes oozed blood, but it flowed slowly enough that she was not worried. She absently wrapped her knee with a couple rolls of gauze, ensuring the wounds were covered and the joint had some support. Stomach growling, she sighed out of her nose and prepared another alcohol pad for her ear. Zelda's eyes widened as she hobbled through the sitting room toward her small table. On the tray sat a small bowl of stew, and a teapot with a teacup next to it. She sank into the chair. Any hopes of bringing her meal back to her bed wiped away with little disappointment. If she was forced to stay upright to enjoy a warm meal, so be it. Zelda poured herself a steaming mug of tea, and began stirring the stew as she thought.
Well, at least I know with some certainty where Zant is concerned with in Hyrule.
She mused.
It is a start, if nothing else. I wonder if Telmir and her people have noticed anything strange in those areas. Or anywhere else, for that matter.
She hummed in surprise as she took her first mouthful of the stew. It was seasoned very well, dried herbs and spices combining to create a flavor experience that was both delicious and the slightest bit tingly on her tongue. She began to eat in earnest.
What had Zant meant by finding my counterpart? I know of no other monarchies in the area besides the Zora peoples, and Queen Rutelia has a son, not a daughter.
A small amount of cream had been added to the pot of tea, and she sipped it experimentally. Zelda closed her eyes briefly, appreciating the slightly muted flavors that the cream produced. The warm drink was the perfect level of comforting. Zelda hummed in appreciation. This meal was prepared by no shadow beast.
Is this supposed to be some sort of apology?
She continued eating, unsure if it truly mattered to her or not. The next evening saw Zelda back on the floor near her wardrobe to check her leg wounds. She was disappointed to find the same puckered red skin beneath the bandage, but at least it did not appear any worse. A small amount of yellowish drainage was present on the bandage, and crusted around the punctures. Zelda carefully cleaned her wounds using some water that she had saved from breakfast for the task. She turned to her pack once they were clean, and began rummaging through the small contents, kicking herself mentally for not remembering the ointment that Ivern had taught her about. Pulling out the small glass jar, she smiled. The ointment would help to fight back any infection, according to her teacher, taking care to only remove a small amount from the jar. She began spreading it over the punctures. The supply Ivern had given her was very small, so she needed to balance using enough to fight the infection and not using too much. She would likely need to keep applying it for a few days, and therefore needed it to last. Once her puncture wounds were taken care of, Zelda rubbed the small residue left on her fingers into her ear wounds. She grimaced, the direct contact bringing bright pain back into the area. She then rewrapped her leg and climbed into bed. She continued trying to piece through the information she had heard during her reconnaissance trips through the halls. On the 4th day since her injury, an unexpected miracle took place. The shroud of twilight surrounding the castle disappeared. Zelda, sitting in her chair before the fire, hurried herself to her windows once the light filtering through them had shifted from the oppressive gray that it had been to the golden white of her memories. Her legs still hindered her, but at least she could bear some weight now. Looking out over Castle Town, the streets were muddled with motion once more. People mingled, and merchants hawked their wares.
Minna must have done this, somehow.
Zelda realized.
Her and that poor man.
With a start, she turned to look at her wardrobe.
I must go and see Telma at once.
Zelda's noon meal had arrived less than an hour before, so she reasoned that she had time before the guards would again make their rounds. She donned her Sheikah scarf as quickly as she could, somewhat hampered by her injury, and plaited her hair down her back. She put her face wraps in place and slipped into the stairwell. Sheikah was forced to move much slower with her injured leg, but she eventually made her way through the sewers and into Telma's bar. Being still early in the day, there were only a handful of Patreons in the main room of the tavern. Sheikah shuffled up to the bar where the hostess stood, wiping glassware.
Well, Sheikah.
Telma's alto voice resonated with warmth and surprise as she pronounced Zelda's false name.
Aren't you a sight for sore eyes? How have you been, honey?
She leaned forward towards Sheikah on the bar, resting an elbow and bringing her bosom dangerously close to spilling from her corset in the process.
Telma?
Sheikah began before swallowing her nerves. Warmth had blossomed across her cheeks. The flirtatious tavern owner had always seemed to harbor a soft spot for her that long endeared her to Sheikah.
It is good to see you, my friend. Times are uncertain.
She continued. Telma set her glass and rag down and turned to face Sheikah directly, resting her other forearm on the bar. Sheikah chose to ignore the shifting bosom beneath the tavern owner's face, and instead took a deep, slow breath.
Aye, uncertain times indeed, sugar. Why don't you come in the back room with me a minute?
Sheikah contracted her brows, confused. With a wink, Telma continued.
I don't bite hard, honey. But anyway, there are some people I think you should meet back there.
She grinned and straightened up as Sheikah's face cleared.
Maybe we can spend some quality time together later on. You look like you could use some relaxation.
She added with another wink as they both moved toward the back room. Sheikah's cheeks burned anew. Coming to the edge of the table, Telma raised her voice a bit as she said,
Everyone, meet Sheikah. She's another concerned citizen with considerable skills. I think she can be some help to our cause. Sheikah, this is Shad, Shay, Alru, and Russell.
Sheikah started at the second name and hastily reached up to rub the back of her head to cover her movement. She never met Ashe, but she remembered the praise Phaedra had given the soldier. She nodded at each person in turn. A bespectacled scholar of sorts, a standoffish soldier with thin braids, an older man in travel-worn clothing, and a stoic character sitting at the table with a leather helmet firmly covering the majority of his face. The table was covered by a large map of the kingdom and surrounding lands, and Sheikah now approached it, coming to stand close enough that she could support some of her weight with its edge. She took a deep breath, surveying the parchment as she gathered her thoughts.
I have been in the castle,
she finally murmured. The energy of the room shifted slightly as the 5 people around her began paying close attention. She cleared her throat before continuing.
The invader is very interested in 2 locations in particular. Here.
She reached toward the upper left side of the map and tapped the location of the ruins in the Snow Peak range of mountains, pausing for a moment.
And here.
She continued after a few heartbeats, tapping closer to the center of the map where the Temple of Time was hidden in the sacred grove of the Pharaon Woods.
I do not know the reason for his interest, but the markings on the map I saw indicated that he could have been searching for something. Other areas had X's and scribbles blocking them from view.
She added, trying to give as much detail as she could. The others exchanged a few glances, but remained silent as they considered her words. After another pause, Sheikah took a breath and asked,
Is it possible for any here to investigate these locations? We must know what he's up to if we are to stop him.
Ashe crossed her arms and addressed Telma.
Who even is this person? Are we just supposed to take them at their word? They could be sending us on a keys chase for all I know, and I don't fancy trudging through the snow for no reason, yeah?
Shad pushed his glasses further up the bridge of his nose before hesitantly clearing his throat.
How did you come by this information in any case? You say you were in the castle? Surely you couldn't have gotten past the guards, or the magical shield.
A spark of recognition lit in the back of Sheik's mind at the tone and cadence of his voice, and she realized that Shad was one of the suitors that her mother had introduced her to some years before. Ashe barked a laugh.
Oh, the guards are nothing to worry about. I wouldn't be surprised if they were able to take out the whole regiment single-handedly,
She said, gesturing to Sheik with her hand.
Ahem.
Telma cut in, bracing her hands on the side of the table next to Sheik and leaning forward.
While I do admire your caution, Ashe, I hope you know you can trust my judgment. I've known Sheik for a number of years now. She's a dear friend of Phaedra's, you understand?
Telma's statement had an effect on Ashe, whose eyes widened in surprise. Before she could reply, Telma turned to Shad and continued.
And Shad, honey, a certain amount of skepticism is healthy. But right now, I'll tell you that the captain of the guard often praised my friend Sheik here for her skills, even when they did not visit me together. If Sheik says this is the information she got, and that it came from the castle, I say we trust her.
The young man closed his mouth and nodded, backing up a few steps to sit in a nearby chair. Russell reached up and rubbed the outside of his face shield.
To tell the truth, there has been an increase of monsters in the Faron Woods. I can go and do some deeper investigating to try to learn the importance of the location.
He offered, not turning his attention from the table. Sheik sagged against the table with relief.
Thank you.
She murmured, voice colored by the emotions now swirling through her mind at Telma's words.
I suppose I will go trudging through the snow.
Ashe grumbled, looking back to the map.
The ruins at that location are so remote, I'm not sure that I'll be able to reach them on my own. Maybe there will be clues before I get that far though, yeah?
She looked up and met Sheik's eye, a smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. She added,
It will be more fun than hanging around with these buffoons anyhow.
Sheik allowed herself a small smile and nodded at Ashe's words. The three men at the table made small objections, but the familiarity and lack of bite clued Sheik in that this was a habitual complaint. Telma straightened and turned to face Sheik. She winked before wrapping an arm over Sheik's shoulders and steering her back toward the bar.
Well now, that wasn't so hard, was it?
She grinned and continued.
There's one other who has been helping us, honey, but he isn't here now. Cute as a button, that one. Bright blue eyes, athletic build.
She wiggled her eyebrows as she spoke, momentarily distracted by her reminiscing. Once Sheik pulled away to sit on a stool, Telma continued.
I'll make sure that he knows what we're working on too, sugar. Now, can I get you anything? On the house for all your hard work for Hyrule.
She pulled out a glass and winked at Sheik again. As much as she would have loved to stay with her newfound compatriots, Sheik knew she needed extra time to return to her rooms.
I cannot stay, Telma. Perhaps another time.
She said, clearing her throat after the statement. Disguising her voice was a strain she was unused to. Telma smiled sadly and nodded. Sheik returned the smile.
I figured as much, but I had to try to get you to stay. Sweets, you do push yourself.
She replied, pausing briefly to look Sheik in the eye.
You take care now, understand? These are uncertain times we live in.
She finished, giving Sheik a final wink.
You as well, Telma.
Sheik slipped from the tavern and began her long and painful walk back to her suite, the spark of hope in her chest beginning to grow once more. She played the conversation over on repeat in her mind, excited to feel she was making a real impact. Once back in her suite, Zelda decided to draw herself a bath. She had not allowed herself the luxury since Xant's arrival, but this afternoon she decided she had earned it. She felt grimy anyhow, her increased activity making her sweat. She hadn't properly washed in some time. After her soak, during which she took care not to let her injury get too wet, Zelda wrapped herself in a large towel and crawled into bed. She bundled herself in the blankets and allowed her muscles to relax. The constant cold of the last few weeks had seeded a discomfort in her soul. The hot bath had been a better idea than she anticipated. She dozed in the bed until she heard the door to her suite open. Once she heard the shadow beast amble around and finally leave her sitting room, Zelda stretched languidly before making her way to the wardrobe. She dressed and fixed her hair before making her way into the sitting room, where she was met with a small portion of cooked carrots, a wilted salad, and what appeared to be pork tenderloin. Everything was once more seasoned to perfection, hints of spice prevalent in the carrots and meat. And though she could have eaten twice her portions, Zelda was grateful for the change in her fare. She did wonder at the sudden change, unsure what could have prompted it, and where Zant found such a skilled cook.
Whoever it is must have their own supply of spices as well. Some of these flavors are entirely foreign to me.
Moving slowly, Zelda returned to her bedroom and lowered herself to the ground before the fire. The warmth had seeped from her as she sat in the cool sitting room to eat her meal, and she realized that she needed to maintain some amount of warmth to help maintain her hope. She once more wrapped her scarf around her neck and pulled her hood up snugly around her ears. After a few moments sitting with the crackle of the fire, she heard the soft jingle of something metallic bouncing against the stone floor. She turned and stood, moving to the wall where there was more furniture for support. Zelda covered her mouth with her hand as the blue-eyed beast entered her room with Midna collapsed along his back. The markings on her skin had inverted their color. What was once pale and clean now appeared sullied, and the swirling dark spots now reminded her of dirtied snow. Zelda took 2 steps forward and dropped to her knees, ignoring the sharp pain that erupted. She closed her eyes, pressing the back of her fingers into the crook of the imp's neck. Blue eyes watched her intently, begging her to save the imp with their expression.
Please tell me, how do we break the curse on this one?
Midna's voice, usually vibrant with teasing and sarcasm, ghosted across the short distance between her and Zelda. The princess took the imp's extended hand in both of her own and looked down at the failing imp.
This is the one. You need him to save your world.
The wolf bristled, shifting his weight back and forth as he gazed at his companion. Zelda tried to make sense of the words Midna told her.
That's why, Princess. Please, you must help Link.
Zelda looked up at the wolf named Link, who still gazed intently at Midna. She released a breath before raising her hand and scanning the creature with her magic. The golden symbol of the Triforce appeared on the back of her hand. She tucked her chin, thinking,
It is but 2 of us. What binds him is a different magic than what transformed him when we first passed the curtain of twilight. It is an evil power.
She stated aloud.
Our world is one of balance. Just as there is light to drive away the darkness, so too is there benevolence to banish evil.
She bit the inside of her lip, considering. After a brief pause, she continued.
Head to the spirit grove that lies deep within the lands guarded by the spirit Farron. There you will find the blade of evil's bane that was crafted by the wisdom of the ancient sages, the Master Sword.
Zelda's words poured from her, almost unbidden. She felt that she somehow inherently knew how to save the man before her. The sensation was surprising, but strangely comforting at the same time.
The Master Sword is a sacred blade that evil can never touch. Evil cloaks you like a dark veil, and that blade is the only thing that can cleave it.
Zelda took a breath before continuing.
Link, hero sent by the goddesses. Like you, I have been granted special powers.
She raised her hand and turned it, showing him the Triforce that burned golden there. Midna rejoined, voice a little more than a whisper.
Fine, Link. You can get to the woods on your own, right?
The blue-eyed beast looked at Midna, a glint of reassurance shining in his eyes.
Princess,
Midna continued, resting her head against the floor.
I have one last request. Can you tell him where to find the Mirror of Twilight?
Zelda gasped, the question finally connecting dots in her mind.
Midna is the Twilight Princess. Midna is the rightful ruler of the Twilight Realm. Midna,
She began after a moment of silence.
I believe I understand now just who and what you are. Despite your mortal injuries, you act in our stead.
Memories from the last 2 weeks rose in her mind, every detail confirming her suspicions.
These dark times are the result of our deeds. Yet it is you who has reaped the penalty.
She shook her head, refusing to let another innocent suffer for her shortcomings.
Accept this now, Midna. I pass it to you.
Closing her eyes, Zelda concentrated on sending as much of her light into Midna's fragile hand as she could.
Please, please let me save her.
She wished before opening her eyes. The imp rose from the floor, and now glowed brightly. Zelda smiled, as Midna's hand pulled from hers. The room lifted away, and she fell back. She expected to tumble head over heels as there was no floor to arrest her movement. But instead, she floated, drifting further and further away from the light. Her smile turned bitter, and a tear fell down her cheek.
I chose this. For all of Hyrule. Together, they will save us all.
With that thought, the darkness finally swallowed Zelda in entirety, and she knew no more. Next time, on Suffusing the Light.
I am pleased to see you awake, my dear. We have much to discuss.
How am I to trust myself when I was unable to protect those I loved most in the world?
You will learn your place, princess.
I am Ganondorf Dragmire, princess, and I am now king of these lands.
You take a very strong interest in my well-being, sir.
As the last remaining in your line, someone ought to.
You have not mentioned courage at all in our time together. And he is coming.
You insolent! I will tear the courage from that child's cold, dead corpse.
Little bird, wake up, little bird.
We will be stronger together. What say you?
Together then, princess, for Hyrule and for Midna.